Oh man, we're sitting here talking about our rough night from last night. Both of us, after we recorded our podcast with James. If you watch the video, you'll see that Josh Hendricks came over to hang out and just listen to the podcast while we were recording. And then him and I and Gary kind of hung out. We haven't kind of a different way to hang out last night. I've never kind of hung out on the computer, but that's basically what we did. Sat around, drank some beer, and told some stories, and had a good time last night.
No, we created the virtual party.
Exactly. I guess when you live on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, that's about the best bar scene you're going to get for a while.
Well, there's a lot of bars around here, but like I said, I grew up in a small town. You just don't wander into a small town bar because most people don't know me. I mean, a lot of the locals, know me, but none of the people that I know hang out in the bars actually know me. And I've heard a couple of them are pretty rough. So I just, in my older, wiser days, I just stay away. It's just not a smart. And like I said, where I grew up, I grew up with guys who would just sit there and wait for an out-of-towner to walk in and try and pick a fight with them, like right away. It's just, I don't know. Did you experience that? And you grew up in a smaller town than I did, and mine was tiny.
Well, we didn't have bars because we were non-alcoholic. We were a dry county.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't have anything. But my dad, he, as you know, he was in a country band, and they travel all over the state. And man, he's got some stories.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just crazy, crazy stories. They actually played in bars that had chicken wire in front of it. Just like you see in the old, and this was back in the 80s, when you would see that stuff. And he talked about this one time. This dude like rushed on stage, and he said he just swung, quit playing, swung one punch right to the face, and just knocked the guy right back into the crowd.
I don't know. It's hard when you're doing something like this and kind of open your life up to people. I don't know what their experiences are. I know what mine are. That's all I know. And I know growing up in a pretty rural, small place, for us, fighting was pretty normal. I mean, that's just kind of the way it was. And not saying it's good or it's the proper thing to do, but man, we grew up, we fought. It was, me and my buddy would square off, fight each other, shake hands afterwards, and be buddies again. And that was, kind of the deal. I just don't know, the way things are today, if that's really the standard. It wasn't that we were encouraged to fight, but we weren't discouraged from fighting.
No.
That's the best way to put it.
I remember,
we had a
every
place
fight I got in was with friends. Growing up, I didn't have fights with non-friends. I broke up a couple of fights and thought I was going to get into it with people I didn't really know, but it was always friends. Like probably the worst fight I ever got into was with my best friend. We were playing basketball, just one-on-one out in the back, and he was going, I had him pegged out of bounds, and he threw it off my leg, and I was like, oh, you're going to play that kind of ball, and we just went at it, and it was just a knockdown drag out for, 20 minutes on the ground. It is just over something stupid like that. So, I mean, that's just how you grew up back in those days. And I'm sure it's still the same way. I'm sure they still scrap today, but probably not like we did back then.
We fought in every single sport. I remember we got in full bench clearing, people out of the crowd, brawls. I mean, that we had a couple basketball ones that would have been, by today's standards, probably people would have got arrested more than likely. But it was just, and the funny part was we continued playing. Like a couple people got ejected, and we went right back to play. The basketball team started right back up. And I mean, it was a literal league, legitimate game. It was a real basketball game. And I just look at that today, and heck, I think today they would cancel the game. That would be it. There would be, people getting, expelled from school. I don't even remember anyone who got kicked out of the game getting expelled from school or anything.
No, heck, I remember.
No.
The worst fight I ever got into in a game was we were playing Legion ball, which I guess would be kind of the AAU baseball these days. And I was playing first base, and the shortstop threw a ball high to me. So I reached back and kind of leaned over the base, and the guy running down the baseline ran into me. And before we hit the ground, we were both throwing punches. And I mean, they pulled us off, and he was out, so they sent him back to the dugout, and I went back to first base, and we landed several good shots on each other, but it was just like dust it off and play on. I mean, there was no ejections, nothing like that. It was just even baseball. If you watch Major League Baseball back then, I mean, now you do anything, you throw inside, you're gone before it even escalates. Back then, man, it was part of the game that all right, you hit a home run, the next guy's probably going to get one to the ribs, and nobody's going to get ejected.
Yeah. If you hit a dinger, you're going to get one at your head, more than likely. You're going to – I remember I got – you'd get pissed off or say something, and next thing you know, a pitcher's throwing one right at you. I mean, it was just I look back at it, and I'm all, well, is the progression better or worse? I don't know. It's just odd that I go to, because I don't have kids, I go to my friends' kids' games who, play, and it's just a very, very different atmosphere. Even in my small town, though, I went and this year I went and watched quite a few games and actually coached in a couple here and there. Just they needed some help, and so I coached in the girls. Got a couple girls squared off in a girls' game, and I was like, okay, I guess they still do go at it a little bit, but I know for the most part, it's just really frowned upon. You're going to get in big, big trouble for that. And it's hard because I remember growing up, I mean, you're a guy. You're top full of testosterone. You're playing a sport. It's competitive. And there's just times when you just punch each other out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's what I mean. It's even when we were talking about guns last night and the proper way to ease into it. It's just a different world. Mm-hmm. The way we grew up with firearms and guns is completely different than people are growing up with them now. I mean, we didn't look at them as it wasn't taboo to own a firearm, or you weren't looked down upon if you. I mean, I've had people comment to me in social settings and say something kind of derogatory that I'm a gun owner. And I'm just like, where'd that come from?
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of ignore it. And they just think, they look at you like you're just I'm running around in a loincloth, killing Bambi and shooting people. And it's just like,
that's that way, people.
It's just not that way, it's a weird world.
Yeah.
But I like,
well, going back to the sports thing, the thing nowadays is just these insane parents at games. And, because of my schedule, I haven't got to go to many of my daughter's T-ball games, but apparently there was an incident at the T-ball game, the last game that they had, where, the coaches are trying to move the kids around so they all get equal playing time. I mean, this is T-ball, for God's sakes. Winning the game is not the most important thing, so they want to get everybody the experience of having some action. So they're moving kids around and things like that. Well, one of the parents was upset, said, I guess, because the coaches weren't trying to win the game and put the best kids into the best spots. So that turned into a conflict after the game was over. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's T-ball, for God's sake. And our team sucks. I mean, poor Ellie, she's on the worst team out there. They haven't won a game yet. Well, they won one game. But, I mean, it's not by effort, I don't think. But, it's T-ball. I'll get into, maybe when you get into, I don't know what minor league and major league, I don't know how they call. I guess I'll find all that stuff out. But when they get into the advanced leagues, then it'll get more competitive. But right now, it's not about competition. It's about learning fundamentals. It's about participating. It's about knowing what to do when the ball's hit to you. So, I mean, winning, I mean, it's something that I want them to learn one day, but not right now. I'm not big on
until kids are, like 12 years old is kind of my attitude. You got to learn, you're learning the game. You're learning, teamwork. You're learning all the pieces that go together with being on a team. And you're right. I've seen parents go bonkers over a 7-year-old soccer game, and they're just pissed off. And I just think, God, what would it be like to live in that house?
No kidding.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm one of the most competitive guys that I know. I mean, I would say it. I was a poor sport growing up. If I lost, I hated it. I just absolutely hated losing. Even a guy that competitive, I look at it and go, okay, there's a point where you just got to say, they're learning, back off. If you want to interject and say something, be a coach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're going to be that way, I just don't know. If I had kids, I would probably not be able to attend the games because I wouldn't be mad at the coaches. I'd probably get in a fight with other parents, and just tell them to shut up. Sit there and leave the kids alone. Let them play. Let them figure it out, And plus, when you're that young, you're not really – and I talked about this with one of my good friends who's coaching his son about – he talked about how they were – I think when we were talking, they were in the 10-11 league, the tackle football league. And he was going, I can't get these kids to, get motivated and get fired up. I went, hey, you got to realize these kids aren't really producing any testosterone yet. When you're that young, the reason you're not real agitated and get after it is because you haven't gone through puberty yet. You're still an adolescent. I said, wait till these kids start going through puberty. I went, you're going to get a different deal. And he goes, it's been now. And he goes, oh, I see it. In the next year, kids started going through puberty, some of the early. He goes, oh, it's different. I went, I told you. I went, you just got to, I just don't understand. You can't teach aggression to a 10-year-old in tackle football. It's really hard to do.
Yeah. That's why, and that makes a pretty good point talking about the testosterone thing. That's why you really have to focus on the fundamentals at the younger age, because that's something they can grasp. They can't grasp the competitive side of it yet. I'm sure they want to win. And my daughter, she knows the difference between winning and losing, and she's a little bit down when they lose those games. But, she shakes it off in just a few minutes because, and I always tell her, I was like, you lost, but here's what you did well, and this is what the coaches like about you. They like the fact that you listen when you do something, you run hard between the bases. When I teach you how to throw, you immediately learn how to do that. So she listens, and that's the most important thing. She listens and she wants to do it the right way. So I don't want her to focus on the winning side of it until later and be more competitive. So, do I want her to keep score? Yeah, I want her to keep score because they need to learn the basics of winning and losing, but it's not the end of the world,
Well, and if you don't keep score, you don't understand what scoring is.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? You're a young kid. The young kids don't even understand the rules of the game. I mean, you're teaching them the very basics. And if you're not teaching them score, well, then they start keeping score, and then they're like, oh, I didn't even know how this worked, And it's just such a weird, strange world right now with the kids side. And I've talked about it several times about competition, because people ask about, they go, well, you get into the kind of the prehistoric view and the ancient, our ancient ancestors. And I go, competition has always been there. Always. Boys were taught competition. They would have, that's where wrestling came from. Wrestling is probably one of the oldest sports there is, and then competitive as far as hunting and shooting a bow and arrow and things like that, being a good hunter, all that stuff was competitive. And the reason we're competitive is for a survival mechanism. If we didn't have that competitiveness in us to make us better, we would literally die lounging around taking naps all day. I mean, all that aggression, it's programmed. It's in us. And understanding like instinct as opposed to even instinct's hard to define because we don't know what causes what we learn. Because you can have, you see it in animals, but you see it in humans that things are passed on, but we don't know if they're technically hardwired or if there's something in between or if it's a learned piece. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm deathly afraid of snakes. Always have been. My entire life. Since I was a tiny kid, I had nightmares about snakes. Well, what does that mean? Well, snakes were probably the most deadly creature on the planet to humans after dinosaurs, obviously. And that was, 66 million years ago or whatever. But that's what you had to fear: spiders, scorpions, snakes, and snakes were probably the most deadly. Is that because somewhere ancestrally, I had ancestors who died of snake bites? I don't know.
Yeah.
But all I know is I'm scared of snakes. I don't like snakes.
Well, I
And
mean,
that's
they've proven that you can take rats and you can put those rats in a certain situation where they have fear or a need or something like that. And then, so you have one group of rats that are afraid when something happens. You have another group of rats that aren't afraid because it doesn't happen to them. Well, they take those offsprings, and those offsprings are immediately scared of what the other ones were afraid of before,
yeah, it's inherited.
it did the fear thing. So genetically, they've proven that genetically things pass down. So, when you're talking about ancestors and you're talking about primitive people, we still have those innate fears in us. I mean, those things are still in our DNA.
Well,
So,
it's because we're animals, and that's the
mhm,
point. When I deal with what I do with my business and primal teaching and simplicity and self-reliance, I talk about that. I go, we like to remove ourselves from the situation that we are animals. We like
mhm,
to think that we're superior and that we're so smart that you know that we've got this all kind of figured out, and we don't. We don't have a clue, and we are animals, and you have to look at that because people look at that and they go, well, violence. Well, where's this violence come from? Well, I wish I knew, but I have a decent idea that it was a survival mechanism. We were competing for resources. Why do
mhm.
humans kill other humans? Is it something evil? Is it something, that's genetically passed down? Well, I look at it as probably a survival mechanism because we would compete for resources. So you would actually war against other tribes or other groups of hominids or whatever have you, because you wanted those resources for yourself and for your community. I mean, when you start thinking of things that way, it starts to make a little more sense.
Mhm.
And going back to the competitiveness, I mean, you're never going to teach boys, they're trying. I think we're trying, but to be non-aggressive.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, by giving them a bunch of soy and a bunch of, a bunch of pseudo estrogen and all that kind of stuff, we're seeing it kind of play out a little bit. But there's gender roles, there's hierarchies, there's these things are put in nature for a reason. It's for the continuation and the survival of that organism. When you look at everything that way, nature does everything for a reason. You know what I mean? It's like, why are alligators still around? That's pretty much there's a few dinosaurs. They consider that they've been around for
Mhm.
millions and millions of years. Well, because they were probably the most best adapted. And you have to look at that, what happens to us and how we evolve and these fears and how they're hardwired. It's because we came from nature.
Mhm.
That's probably why I fear snakes. It's probably hardwired in my lineage somewhere. I may have been around a lot of snakes at some point. Not me, but my ancestors. Who
Yeah.
knows? But
Well,
it's sad that,
at
well, it's
least we're
just
not
sad.
competing for. Yeah, it is, but it's luckily we just don't compete for, life or death situations. Have you ever been down to the Mayan temples down in Mexico?
No, I've been through the temples in Oaxaca, and I
Okay.
don't think those aren't Mayan. Those were something else. I can't remember. I may be wrong, but I haven't been through the Mayan temples. No.
I went one time when Emily and I were down in not Cozumel. We were down in Cancun. We went, or Punta Cana. We went to Tulum, and Tulum's one of the big ones, and if not the biggest pyramid that's in Mexico. But off to the side of it, they had an arena still, and it's you can see exactly what game they played. And they had this wall, and on each wall there was a hole, and you had, I think, two sets of guys, and that could be completely blowing what it really is out of proportion or out of be wrong. But for what I understand, there were two guys on each team, and then they would fight to see who could get the ball into the hole on each side. So almost like, a primitive basketball. But the funny thing was they competed hard because the winning team got sacrificed to the gods. So it was an honor. If you won, you were going to die, but yet they fought and tried to win the game to be sacrificed to the gods. So kind of
Well,
glad we're not doing that these days. I don't know if I would have tried too hard.
and that's the thing too. We get so wound up about stupid things today. And one of my rants was, we were talking about this last night and we started partying and we couldn't record another one. We were a little too messed up, and it wouldn't have been probably entertaining for people, just us. But one of them is I don't know if you've seen the advertisements for this vest and jacket that has all these pockets in it. Have you seen that yet?
I don't think so.
There's a new product out, and I probably was on Shark Tank and all that. I've been seeing commercials for it. I want to say it's called Johnny Vest or something like that. And it's basically a place for you to put all your extra shit into your, I'm like, I mean, it doesn't have like 2 or 3 pockets. It's got like 15, 20 pockets and things in this thing. And I'm going,
I mean, is it for technology stuff?
It's for mainly tech stuff. And I'm like, okay, you got 2 pockets in your front, in your back. And then if you're wearing a jacket, that's 6 pockets. If you can't fit all your shit in 6 pockets, you might want to rethink everything. And that's what I mean. We get so wound up that we're so worried that we don't have enough pockets now. Mm-hmm. So I got to create a product for you with a bunch of pockets in it, so you can make sure you've got that smartphone with you. I think it's even got a pouch for a tablet. I think you could stick a tablet in this thing. And I'm like, what in the world are we doing? And I just look at that, and it's kind of a microcosm of what's going on. It's kind of the same thing of like parents getting all wound up over little kids' games.
Yeah.
You just got to think, why are you wasting all that energy? You could be wasting that energy and doing something positive in your life instead of sitting there yelling at a bunch of little kids with your vest on, with all your gear and your pockets jammed full of crap. I just think of that and I go, man, we are just ultimate consumers. Mm-hmm. Is all we are. And that's a little tangent, but it's just, I think we just have our priorities so screwed up. And understanding those things to focus on. And I've done it. Hey, I've been guilty of it. I've gotten caught. But, living in a more remote and less populated area, it's interesting how a lot of the stuff that I used to worry about, I just don't worry about. I don't care. And you get older, I don't care what people think of me. I could care less. I really don't care.
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I care about what my family and friends think about me, but I'm not going to do something outside of their purview. But I really don't. Yeah, I don't care what other people think about me. I am who I am, and if you don't like it, then I don't think I'm a dick. So, and I don't go out to try to be. I'm sure maybe some people think I am sometimes, but it's just because it's about relationships, and I'm happy with the relationships I have, and I'm not trying to create new ones every day.
Well, yeah, even though we're very social, you're like me. I mean, all my friends are long-term friends. I mean, many decades. I have some friends I've known where we're babysat together as little kids, and we're still friends today. And I think that's part of it, too, is we don't have those connected relationships to where you act that way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You go, well, what do I care? I'm going to yell at this guy because I don't know him. I think he's acting like a jerk. If it's your friend, you approach it differently. It's someone and you have a relationship. You usually approach it a little differently. And yeah, I agree. It's just a weird world. It was just talking about the stuff we were talking about last night. And yeah, what are we going to do? That's why I think a lot of people are searching for the thing I'm searching for, and that's to get away. Yeah. If you can, just kind of remove yourself away and take a deep breath. I don't know how people can live their entire lives in cities, to be honest with you. That's just me. I mean, I don't say there's anything wrong with big cities, but to me, it's chaos. It's just pure chaos to me.
Yeah, well, and I do, and I don't live in a big city. Lexington's 350,000 people, but I mean it's pretty populated in this area that we're in. But there are still times that I do think about it. I think about what it would be like to own 20 acres and have a house out out in the country a little bit, to where you can grow things and you can do different things. And then but I also think about how busy I am and the upkeep that it would take to do it. And then that kind of makes me realize, well, maybe I'm kind of happy at this point in my life with the kids that I don't have the extra responsibilities of taking care of a farm, so to speak.
Oh God, no. Yeah. You'd have to live on it. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be a mistake to try and do, because I'm not going to homestead mine. I have no plans. I'm not going to get animals, and I'll probably grow some food, and, obviously I hunt and stuff, but I don't have the time. for that either. And it's a balance, and you just kind of look at what you can do. I just don't think my life's all that unique, but people tell me it is. And I'm like, I don't think I think my life would have been more unique 100 years ago because I'm not doing the things they were doing, which was more hardcore than what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, unique is a perspective. If I didn't know you and I met you for the first time and we discussed lifestyle, I would say your life's unique. But you know enough people in that community where it's not a unique situation. So I think people get so caught up in their own lives that they only see people that do similar things in their lives. I don't think people realize how much different stuff there is out there. How different people live their lives, and it's okay to live those different lives. I think that's where this political polarization is, because people think that, I'm only going to be around people like me, and everybody that's doing it is just different, and you think of it maybe as a unique situation where this person does it different. He's a freak or she's a freak, whereas people just don't take the time to realize that people live different lifestyles than they do. And it's okay. There is nothing wrong with somebody living a different lifestyle than you, as long as they're not hurting anybody else or whatever, just, they just live a different lifestyle. If you go online and you search, you can find people that can do about anything, Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just okay with it. I don't care.
Well,
and
that's what
somebody does.
And that's why I kind of talked about in the book. And also, I talk to people about that, when you're going to look for a more remote place to live or, more rural, you have to make sure you fit in with the community, and that's why I love it up here. I'm close to Canada, so I'm not too far away. And everyone knows I've known several Canadians over the years. They're just nice. It's a weird way to say it, but Canadians are just nice people for the most part. It's a different little deal. And up here, it's the same way. Every time I come up here or I talk to someone on the phone, if I'm away, I go, golly, people are nice up there. It's just it's a different perspective, but it's what I like. It's kind of where I fit in. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good fit for you or anyone else. And I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake of changing their life is they don't put enough research into it at first. And I've always talked about that too. And people, you get a weird look when I just say, some people just don't get along. They just don't. I mean, certain cultures, ethnicity groups, racial groups, religious groups, political groups, it's just a way of life, and just deal with it. Instead, what I have a problem with is when people try and force their views into a situation where they're either the new person, new guy, or outsider. And they come in and go, here I am, screaming their head off and saying, you will adapt to me. And then they run into a bunch of problems and they can't figure out why they're not fitting in and why they're having all this, all this friction and problems. If you're going into a place, that's why I say you got to figure it out. There's nothing wrong if you don't fit in. Go find the community where you do fit in, or if you're unhappy with that situation, to include being married, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. If you're unhappy, change it. Leave. There's no reason to be unhappy.
Yeah, and you're not gonna flash dance the situation and Kevin Bacon move into the town and turn a non-dancing town into a dancing town. One person isn't going to change an entire community. So it's difficult to. You can ask for acceptance. You can say this is how I am. But I don't know.
Well, and I think that's just being open-minded, though, too, understanding that you're coming into a community that does not know you. So you got to kind of earn your way in and figure it out. I always said when I came up here, if things got turned south and all of a sudden, I'm having battles and dealing with people, well, I would leave. And I've said that because I've been in unhappy situations or lived in places where I wasn't happy. And instead of changing it, I just grinded it out and stuck it out and said, I just got to make it work. And I think that's so foolish. In society, we feel like we're trapped, but technically we're really not. Don't get me wrong. You got family and, people always want to be around their family and all that. And I agree. I agree with that too. But the problem is, do you want to be close to your family and miserable? Or would you rather change your situation, be happy, and go visit your family when you can? It's all perspective.
Yeah, it is perspective. I mean,
Yeah.
and I kind of feel sorry for, talking about, this is kind of a tangent on that, when people say, all this struggling people are doing in Eastern Kentucky with coal mines, and what I hate is when somebody comes in and a politician will say, well, they just need to move out of that area and go find a job somewhere else. First of all, when you're dirt poor, you can't just pack up and migrate somewhere else. So it's, that's where you go into this community, you don't understand it. And then somebody goes in and starts dictating what should happen, and they wonder why people would rather be poor and kick them out than somebody that's actually trying to help them and accepting them too, so.
Well, and they're probably happy in their community.
Mm-hmm.
It's multi-generations that worked at the coal mines. So that's their community. That's what they know. And I did. I mean, just like you, I grew up poorer, but I grew up poor. And I remember for me to get out, I had to achieve certain things, and I knew that. I knew I had to save money. I had to work at an early age, put the money away, figure out how to go to college, figure out how to do this stuff. And I think that was because I saw a lot of people in my community who were trapped because they hadn't, in my family, they just hadn't done anything to give themselves options.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson for me. I'm not saying, hey, I'm brilliant or perfect. I just looked at it and said, I do not want to have that happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured out how to get out and do other things. And I ended up getting trapped later on in life. I was in a city. I was in a job that I didn't like. And I had to figure out how to kind of fix it.
Yeah.
And once I did it, though, because it was so daunting while I was trying to figure it out, and I was so scared, and I'm all, what do I do? And after it was done, though, I realized, what was I thinking? I think, well, if you have your act together, you have a plan, it'll work itself out. Is there going to be some pain in there? Absolutely. But how many times have you heard about people that just said, I've had enough, changed their lives, went in a different direction, and all of a sudden everything started working for them.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, sometimes it fails too, but that's life. And it's a hard one because, today I think a lot of people do feel trapped because what is it? 60-70% of Americans have $1,000 or less in the bank. Doesn't give you a whole lot of options. I mean,
No.
if you have less than $1,000 in the bank, you're not getting too far. So yeah, it's I'm like I said, I'm not all knowing by any stretch, but I just know in my life and what I teach is if you're unhappy, change it.
Yeah.
Just change it. No matter what, just figure it out.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's what I'm doing right now, but I'm trying to do it in a smart way. I'm not quitting my job, and I'm not trying to move my family across the country without a solid job opportunity. I'm trying to grind out a new business for me to be happy and to better take care of my kids, so, and it's funny, we were talking about moving and stuff. I was like you, I was kind of a nomadic personality. I had about a 3-year lifespan where I was happy somewhere. And from the time I got out of high school, I've moved frequently, but that's what made me happy. I wasn't, and I think, talking about the primitive human, that's kind of what the primitive human did. I mean, they couldn't just hang out in one spot. They had to go where the food was. They had to go where the animals were. So I think genetically we were destined to be to move around. So I think part of that, how things get contentious is if you're around the same people all the time in the same area, I don't think humans are meant to just hang out in one spot for 25 years.
Well, no. Yeah. Because until we had agriculture 10,000 years ago, we were nomadic.
Yeah.
And like you said, we had to be nomadic because if you stayed in one area, you would eventually hunt out the game there. So you had to move. So after you hunted an area out, and plus animals are smart, believe it or not, people think they're dumb. They finally figure out, hey, we're all dying. These other animals keep eating us, killing us and eating us. Well, eventually they figure it out and take off. So you'd have to move. And I agree with you. And I think even the work environment, for me especially, being in an office, in a cubicle, you might as well put my head in a vice. I mean, it is excruciating for me. I don't do well in that situation. I've always moved around. I like moving around. It's just, I like a change of scenery. And I think you're right. I think this whole kind of sedentary lifestyle and staying in one place and not moving, it's new. It's fairly new to the human condition. And I think that's where a lot of our depression's coming from, a lot of issues, a lot of anger, a lot of angst, and just where we're at a point where the animal's caged and something's got to give. And I don't say that in some kind of, negative, pure negative light. Some people like that. Some people do like living in one place, but I would say overall.
Well, some people like simplicity, and that's, and that's simple. It's easy not to move around. And yeah, I hate packing up a house and moving. I mean, that's one of the least favorite things, but I like experience in new areas. Right now in the job I have, this is probably it's getting ready to be the longest I've ever worked in one spot. And that's kind of crazy for me because usually I get antsy. When I was left television, I didn't want to get out of television, but I wanted to move somewhere else to do that, somewhere where I made a little bit more money, but to have new adventures, because I was bored with doing the same, even though we were doing different stories, it was still the same area, same people I was driving to, and I get bored with that. So, if I hadn't met Emily, I would have bolted. I was looking at a couple moving to DC or Charlotte, North Carolina. And, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay somewhere a few years and then move somewhere else. So, I think a lot of my depression about work and life comes from that. It's like, I there are times I feel like I'm stuck here, and even though I have friends and family here, my nature is to want to go somewhere else and do something else, and experience new things. I'm the type of person, I love to experience new things.
Me too.
And I don't, and when you stay somewhere so long, I mean, you can do a staycation and you can go see other things around. But, when I think I told the story when I lived in Washington, D.C., it was the end of the third year when I decided, holy shit, I've got to go start seeing these museums because I didn't do it. So when you live somewhere, you don't think about necessarily doing those things, like going to do a bourbon tour or something like that. We've done it, but it's just not, that's something an outsider does,
Well, what's that saying? We're alive, but are we living kind of thing?
Exactly.
And I agree with you. Humans are curious. I mean, we're curious creatures. We are, for the most part. I think some of it's been beaten out of us over the last 100 years. But with that, yeah, you have to figure out what motivates you. And I think once you lose that motivation, depression is kind of a natural course. Mm-hmm. And me and you've talked about that. I think all humans experience depression at some point in their lives. I've seen my dog get depressed, and it's, I don't know
my poor dog he's depressed all the time. He is, once kids came around, he became a dog. He became a depressed animal.
Well, probably because he realized he wasn't number one anymore.
Yeah.
That the attention was taken off him. And you see that. And that's what I mean. Today we're told, well, if you're depressed, you just got to medicate. Just medicate yourself, and not realizing, and that's what I mean. We act like it's this huge problem, but like I said, depression is normal. I don't think, now don't get me wrong, there's clinical depression, but I think there's obviously people throughout their lives, no matter how good you have it, there's going to be points where you're depressed. Things aren't going to work out. I've never met a person today who went, my life has been nothing but butterflies, puppy dogs, and chocolate bars. That's all it's been. There's always something in there that's going to be a negative, or you're going to assume as a negative, but those are the things you learn from. I think that's what the experience, and that's what I kind of like about the millennials and kind of their new attitude of, nonconformity a little bit. They're like, well, screw it. And I don't know if I'd like to see the analysis on them living at home, because the stat is about 50%, 30 and under are now living at home.
I have no idea.
It was a really high stat. I didn't know where it came from. And those studies are always, who knows where the numbers come from. Mm-hmm. But I looked at that and I went, everyone's all, well, that means they're lazy and, they're not motivated. And there is some of that.
Yeah. But it's just a different way of thinking.
But who's to say they're like, why do I need to move out, get my butt in more debt, And maybe my family actually likes me hanging around, and I like hanging around too, because remember, in our cultures before, if you had to marry, you would marry outside. You would have to go to another tribe, because we were smart enough to know that the interbreeding wasn't a good thing in humans. In humans, in some animals, it's totally fine. But in humans, we noticed that it wasn't quite working. Or if you're heavy male to female, well, the males are going to have to split off and try and find another tribe or try and find something else. So with that, you kind of look at how all that works, but we're always in a community per se. So this whole new thing too of soon as you hit 18, get out of here and don't come back. Well, that's new too. When you think about it, that's fairly new to the human condition as well, of this separation from family. I don't think there's anything wrong with them staying around. And now if they're mooching and laying on the couch all day and getting high and not doing much, well, that's a problem. And that's a problem in general at any age, and even if you're not living at home, that's a problem. But I think they look at it as, you know what, screw the man. I don't need to do this. I can do things my own way. And I like that. I hope that's kind of a renaissance where we're thinking of, because we've talked about this, the work week. The work week is bullshit. I mean, it is programmed to get the absolute maximum out of a human before they snap. That's basically how the work week was devised. They experimented until they realized, well, if we work them too much, eventually they go bonkers, and that's it. So they've got it down to a science of, we're going to work you to the absolute maximum. And I think that's a problem too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's gotten more that they've realized that if you work them to a certain point, they become docile to it and won't do that. Because I mean, I work at a place where when things get rolling, we work 50 to 60 hours a week.
Oh, and I think that's very common today.
And that's, and people just get to the point where you're working 6 days a week and they're stuck, so they have to, in order to be happy, in order to be satisfied, they have to kind of just say, all right, this is how it is, and they lose their will to fight about it.
And you don't have the time to think about it.
Yeah.
You're so busy that you don't even have time to think about how crappy the situation is sometimes and how you can get out. I've had friends who said, they've told me, I go, well, you hate your job. Why are you looking? They go, I don't even have time to interview or get my resume together. They're just like, I don't even have the time to do it. And I think it's more of a burnout, but you're right. I looked at it because in law enforcement, we had to work 50-hour weeks. We called 10 hours a week were called law enforcement availability pay. They called it LEAP. So you were, depending on what agency you're in, it was either mandatory or you were on call. Near the end, it was pretty much everyone was mandatory. So you talk about 50 hours, then you got to get your workout in. Then you got to go get all your crap in. I was commuting, 45 miles one way into, Orange County out of San Diego. So there was days I was on the road for 3 hours, just driving back and forth. I could easily have 14 to 16-hour days every day. And I did. After a while, you just can't take it anymore. So the free time I had was scramble mode. I had to go grocery shopping, pay my bills, yard work, whatever. I had to stack everything in this small box. And by the time I got a break, I remembered I was just toast. I didn't even know what to do with myself. And I think that's a problem too, is we're continuously busy. We don't ever get a break. And humans, just like a dog. I mean, my dog lays around and takes a lot of naps. And I look at it and go, that's pretty good. But humans had a lot of recreation time, a lot of rest. That we had a lot of downtime. When things were bountiful, things were good. Hey, we took it easy. You got your shelter, you got food, your family's doing well. No, you take a break. And I don't think we have that today. And it's sad. And I think the obesity epidemic, I firmly say this, and I probably, like I said, probably pissed off a bunch of people last night when I was saying, America, God, lose some weight. And I don't say, they think I'm perfect and I came out of the womb some thin, lean athlete, and it's not true. I've dedicated my life to make sure that I'm as healthy as I possibly can be, because my health is the key to everything I do. And that's the way I look at it. But I'm looking in the next 10 years, I think we're going to have a drastic health epidemic, and it's going to get worse.
Oh,
I mean,
well, and I've told you, and at work, I would say almost all of our population's under 55 at work. I mean, I'm sure that if you took the percentage of it, the mass percentage of people at work are over 55. And this year alone, we've had 10 people that have died. And most of them was from just weird causes like heart attacks or cancer or just something crazy. And, it's really gotten me thinking, is it just because they're just being worked to death? They're not in shape, because really when you work 60 hours a week, you have to be a dedicated son of a bitch to go work out. I mean, I do it, but I have to sacrifice time with my kids to do it. I have to sacrifice time doing things that help me get out of this job or whatever. So, and you see the obesity, and it's easy to eat unhealthy because you can't take the time to make a good, healthy meal. The things that they provide you at work, as far as the cafeteria, that's not the best food. And you're not going to make the best choices there. Vending machines everywhere. So the whole factory is set up to be an unhealthy lifestyle. So, and like I said, we've lost 10 people this year to just freak things. And I don't know how many of them were accidents, but I don't think many of them were. And every one of them seemed to be under 55 or even younger.
Yeah.
Some of them are under 40, And I've heard so many stories of people that retire after 25 years. And like when I first started working there, this dude retired after 25 years and freaking went home and died the next week.
Yeah.
How bad does that suck?
Well, in law enforcement, it's very common that within the first 3 years, they did a stat at one point after retirement of how many people died. You left the job and it was just turn and burn. And it was two things. You were no longer, you were out of something that was so intense and you'd done so long. The other part was that you never maintained your body. You never maintained your health, and you finally got away from it. And that's it. It's too late. And that's what I just can't figure out how companies don't see that. If I owned a large company, my priority would be to keep you healthy. First of all, it keeps
that's
my.
What I don't understand. That's what I don't understand either.
It keeps my health insurance down. First of all,
mm-hmm.
And I've seen people who are healthy, me included, how much better you work healthy as opposed to unhealthy. When you're unhealthy, you're taking breaks all the time. You're trying to figure out how to get out of work all the time.
Yeah,
and you're not productive usually. I just don't understand this whole mindset of the corporate world of not putting in a very well-structured wellness program.
Yeah.
And you have to make it volunteer, obviously. You can't just force people to say you're going to work out, but you can say, hey, we only have a limited amount of money and ability to insure. If you're not going to follow the tool, follow what we're telling you, we may not be able to insure you. I mean, that's just reality.
Well, that's what it seems like it's getting to.
It is.
But, and here's what I understand. We have at work, we have a cafeteria. And like I said, we have vending machines all over the place. And our healthcare is going up and up and up every year. And our company, I would say, makes a huge profit off of us selling things in the cafeteria and the vending machines. The prices on those things are ridiculous. So, they are profiting off of us. Well, is that profit greater than having a cafeteria and saying, if you eat what we're providing you in this cafeteria, which are healthy meals, if you eat the healthy meal, that's free, and if you follow this program, you get discounts if you do the wellness stuff for insurance and stuff like that. But if you can prove that you're doing it in a better way, your insurance is free, because it was always free until just a few years ago anyway. And now we're paying probably better than most, but we're still paying out of pocket. But why not do those things to try and encourage? I mean, look at Google. That's what Google does. Yeah. You can't, I guarantee you go into Google's cafeteria, you're not going to find crap food in there. And it's all free.
I bet you find a lot of Red Bull and
I'm sure you're going to find that stuff. And I know they overwork. I mean, I'm sure overwork their people, but it seems like they're more personality types if that's what they want to do.
Well, and they have laundry facilities, My attitude is
They have nap stations.
Well, and naps are natural. I mean, honestly, naps are, a little 15-minute nap for me is golden. I'm not a big napper, but when I have to, all I need is 15, 20 minutes and I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to roll. And that's how I always looked at it. If I ever start a any type of corporation, that would be my focus, to make sure my workers are healthy and happy. Why it costs you a little extra money to have laundry facilities, but it's a pain in the butt when you're working all the time and then you got to do laundry on your free time. You don't got time to cook or eat. I would have a healthy options. You're right. I'd say, you're only going to have these healthy options, but they're free. It's not going to be a massive selection, but this food is free for you. And yeah, I wonder if they've done it because corporate America is a bean counter society where they said, you know what, we'll make more money off the vending machines and all the junk we're selling them and the crappy lunches. And it compensates for them being unhealthy. And heck, who knows? Maybe they want you to die early too, so they don't have to pay your retirement. I don't know anymore with corporations. I mean, they've become, it's not our parents or our grandparents' corporate world anymore.
No.
It's use you, abuse you, get as much as they possibly can, and kick you out the door. I know it's a negative thought, but that's kind of how I feel. That's why I do my own stuff. I don't know if I could work in a corporate environment again. I may have to, depending down the road what happens. But I couldn't see going back to that. It would be
it's hard being an open-minded intellectual thinker and working in a place where I work, because I do think about that stuff all the time. I mean, and that's what makes it difficult on me, because I constantly see things and wonder why, and a lot of people there don't. They've just given in, and it's like, this is what I do, and it's easy. I go home, make good money, and go home to my family at the end of the day, without realizing, well, you don't have a lot of time with your family, So,
well, yeah,
it's kind of a different thing,
Well, and now almost both parents work.
Yeah.
Almost all across the board. And I look at that personally. And I think that's where a lot of the kids are losing their way too, is because there's no parenting going on anymore. Both are working. They're scattered. You're fried. You come home, you're pissed off, you're tired. And I've always said, and I don't mean this in any sort of sexist way, but my attitude's always been this way, and I wouldn't even call myself a traditionalist, but someone has to stay home and take care of the kids. I've always said that. But unfortunately today in society, it just doesn't happen. We can't. We're taxed out. We got to pay for, healthcare. We got, all these bills to pay. And for me, even again, if I owned a company, I would want to try and figure out a way to where my workers could have just a single worker. Pay them well, make sure they're healthy, get the most out of them, low turnaround. But yeah, who knows what the answer is. It sucks. I mean,
yeah. And like you said, though, I mean, the bean counters have figured it out, and they're getting better at it all the time. So they have decided what they can do, to maximize their profit. So, I don't think they probably want people to work there 15 years and quit, because now you don't have to pay the pension. You don't have to, you get them before they get too old and start being a burden. So I think, I wouldn't be surprised that that's kind of their goal, is to get people to go hard for 15 years and get out, and move on somewhere else.
That's probably a very good point. Maybe corporate America has realized that to be the most profitable they can be is to just not be loyal, grind you and get you out of there, get what they can and have you move along. But see, we're at a point too where this is going to come to a head. No one has a retirement anymore. So not only are we going to face a health epidemic, we're going to face a retirement and cost of living and ability to support yourself epidemic, because no one has any money to retire.
Yeah. Well, we have, like we have a good 401k program, but that's not guaranteed. Imagine if you're getting ready to retire and you have another massive recession. I mean, our stocks, we lost 50% of our wealth in less than a year or just a few months.
Yeah.
And look what happened to people that were on the verge of retiring from their place of employment at that time. They had to say, well, I can't do it now.
Yeah. They
ended up working. Yeah. They had to stay and work a few more years. So, you're not guaranteed, even when you do retire, let's say you're retired, you've been retired 3 or 4 years and you're living healthy off your 401k. And next thing you know, another recession hits, and now you've been out of the workforce for a few years, maybe a little bit too old. You're looking at Social Security in 5 years down the road because you started working, retired at 45, 50, had it and did it right. But then all of a sudden you lose all your 401k because of a recession or something like that. I mean, getting back in the workforce at that time is going to be hard to do.
Well, and I think the best way to go about it is like we were talking last night about how you and Emily did the John Ramsey program, David Ramsey, John Ramsey. And, I think for most people, and that's not what we're taught in schools, is how to manage money, really, is get your finances in order. If there's any place you could start, is get your finances in order and get healthy. You do those two things and a lot of stuff works its way out. Mm-hmm. And you have so much more freedom. You feel better. You're happier. And there's no way we're getting rid of money. That's pretty much here to stay. Mm-hmm. So you have to work within the system. No one's, I can't walk down to the liquor store here if I need something and trade a pelt. I would love to. The barter system is starting to come back a little bit, but overall, we're in a monetary system. So we got to figure it out. And I think for most people, and that's the one thing I've always been pretty good at, is decent, better than most, is managing my money. And that's always given me freedom, is the fact that I had always had a way out most of the time. I had enough in savings and I had a way to do what I wanted. Was I rich? Am I rich? Do I come from rich parents? No. But I always had enough to get to that next location or change jobs, move, and do those things. And that's the best advice I could give people. Get your finances in order, get healthy, and things will kind of open up for you. If you're unhappy, you know what I mean? Yeah. If you're happy,
just keep doing what you're doing.
Just do what you're doing. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, dude. All right. Well, I got to get out of here. We got to go eat some dinner and wait for the wife and kids, the girls, to come back from Kansas. So, I think this is a pretty good episode. We had a whole other topic we were going to talk about, but I think we ran into something good. So I enjoyed it.
That life stuff, it pops up on you. I hope people enjoyed it. It's, like we've said, we're not all knowing by any stretch, but we're older guys,
we're trying to figure it out.
We're trying to figure it out too. And we figured some of it out, and that's it. And, I think we both have stuff to share to help people. And I enjoy when people help me, because I learned from it too. So.
All right, dude. Well, let's wrap this thing up, and everybody, we will get another episode up next week. Thanks for listening.
Is that video up?